Thanks, everyone. I'm a strong believer in starting on time, particularly as this session is only an hour long. Just so you know, the program is slightly wrong in that it's cut off morning tea. So this session finishes at 3:15, not 2:15 as is in the program. Sorry, 3:15, not 3:30, which is what's written in the program. So I'm going to keep everyone to time. We are absolutely delighted to have Raj Isar here. He is the Professor of Cultural Policy Studies at the American University of Paris, and extremely important academic in this field. He tells me that creative industries is not really an area he works in, but I think he does. So he does now. And following that, we heard from Legally Agreed talking about the AU Kids Online project. But I'll not waste time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, earlier today, this morning, after listening to Ben Goldsmith's question, I thought perhaps I'd prepared the wrong talk. That, you know, being an international person and having an international overview, the big picture in that sense, a big worldwide picture, there are so many ways in which what one country does is either determined by, involved with, imbricated in what happens internationally, that maybe I should have organized my talk on those lines. And I said, well, it's a bit too late to change now. So, but I did feel that I really had prepared the wrong one. So I'm now going to give you the wrong talk. And before I do that, I'm going to say how very delighted I am to be here, very pleased. I've enjoyed the last 2 days very, very much, and I'm really very grateful to you, Stuart, for having suggested that I come up at the end of my stay at the UWS, where I'm something they call an eminent research visitor for a couple of years. So it's been a great chance to experience the intricacies of life, not just in Sydney, but also in Brisbane. And the title of the thoughts that I prepared may seem a little mysterious to you. It's called Cultural Policy Confronting a Hydra. And, you know, you might wonder, in ancient Greece, the Hydra was a many-headed monster slain by Hercules. But there is a newer connotation, which is the one in which the word means a persistent or multifaceted problem that is difficult to be eradicated. And for me, as I study cultural policy, there are many problems. There's a whole raft of problems, and I'm going to focus on two of these this afternoon in the hope that they will be useful in the context of these discussions. And the first of these is the way in which the notion of cultural policy has perhaps been charged with burdens too great for it to bear. And the second is the divided and perhaps even divisive ways in which the term is understood. Now, in every historical period, new ideas emerge in the intellectual landscape. And over the last 5 decades, the pace of such lexical emergence has accelerated, generating a turnover in intellectual ideas and fashions that would have truly bewildered our ancestors. Of course, that's not the only thing. There are lots of other things that would bewilder them as well. And here, successive dominant ideas have derived their impact from the apparent ease with which each of these ideas has seemed to be able to address complex issues, operating as organizers at various levels, focusing attention, both scientific and popular, intercultural dialogue, cultural diversity, creative industries, creativity, innovation are among these sorts of organizing labels that we all use today. And what's interesting is that the life of these terms goes through different phases: formation, dissemination, sort of discursive adaptation, and popularization, before they attain a final stage of what you might call consolidation, in which they become integral parts of the general vocabulary. And in the process, they become truth-generating concepts. They don't necessarily always last very long in this capacity, however. Sooner or later, many of these catchwords are abandoned or forgotten. Some, however, prove their usefulness and continue to be of value well past their phase of consolidation. And I'm pretty sure that the word culture is such a consolidated term today, and I'm sure it has many decades of useful life ahead of it. I'm not also that sure of the term cultural policy. I'm not sure that it's as solidly entrenched. And I say this, although the destinies of the term seem to be rosy, as it's yoked together rhetorically with other leading tropes, such as identity, democracy, rights, or indeed innovation. But when one looks more closely and examines actually existing cultural policy, it seems to me that scope and power are far more limited. Now, one of the overarching discontents of cultural policy is the polysemous nature of the word culture itself, the term itself, without which, of course, without that polysemic nature, cultural policy wouldn't have achieved the purchase that it has had. And the difficulty is that there's a kind of permanent mixing of these meanings that goes on. And I'm sure you're all very familiar with the schematic genealogy of terms, of usages of culture that Raymond Williams worked out over 30 years ago. But I'll just give them to you again very quickly. The sense of culture as a general process of intellectual, spiritual, and aesthetic development. That was the earliest sense in which people used the word. The second meaning, which emerged at the end of the 18th century among the German Romantics, was this idea of a particular way of life. It could be of a group of people, a nation, a period in history, humanity in general. And then the third sense, which is the works and practices of intellectual and particularly artistic activity. And today what we see happening is that all three meanings, or variants of these meanings, overlap and intersect, and some of the ways in which this happens is rather problematical. Now, the first meaning, that general refinement meaning, is rarely used today, at least overtly. The second, ways of life meaning, predominates in public rhetoric, but in varying degrees from one country to another, and often from one socioeconomic category to another. The creative and creative industries discourse is based on the third meaning, which is the notion of intellectual and artistic creativity. Yet, if only to complicate matters, the way we talk about culture today also conflates different meanings, these three different meanings, and uses them interchangeably. But in the end, the overarching understanding of culture as identity, the identity of a particular human group, supersedes them all. And ministries and departments of culture, the agents of cultural policy in one sense of the word, which were all at one point content to support the flourishing of culture as arts and heritage, and of which some now invest in culture as a productive resource, as informed by the work of bodies such as the CCI, well, they all use a ways of life understanding as the ultimate justification or telos of that investment. And that was very clear from the two official presentations that we heard this morning. And this development is part of the conceptual consolidation I referred to at the outset, and it reflects the ways in which culture has expanded so prodigiously throughout the social realm, to the point at which, as Frederick Jameson famously put it once, everything in our social life, from economic value and state power to everyday practices and the very structure of the psyche itself, can be said to have become cultural in some original and still not adequately theorized sense. I've paraphrased a little bit, but that's more or less a quote. And in all of this, cultural policy, it has become a semantically bivalent term, and it seems to be employed, broadly speaking, in two quite distinct sets of ways by two different communities of inquiry and for divergent purposes. The first and most common understanding of a cultural policy is that it is a system of aims, practical objectives and means pursued by a government or a governmental agency and applied in some sort of explicitly systemic, coherent way to the works and practices of culture understood as the arts and heritage. And the analysis of cultural policy in this sense means studying how governments support and regulate the arts and heritage. It also means, as I said earlier, analyzing how cultural expression is used as a resource in the service of measurable ends, such as economic growth, employment, and social cohesion, or in the service of broad and difficult to measure purposes, such as